Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have heard about China's real estate industry being on the brink of collapse. However, now high-rise buildings constructed with tofu-dreg structures are actually collapsing as well. Today, I will share some significant news regarding poorly constructed buildings, such as the tofu buildings in China, and the resulting consequences for the people here. In China, the term tofu-dregs, the remnants left after making tofu, is widely used as a metaphor for poor workmanship. This implies that a tofu-dreg project denotes a poorly executed endeavor. The term tofu project was first coined by former Premier Zhu Rongji in 1998 when he remarked during a tour of the Yangtze River flood protection embankments that they were as fragile and spongy as tofu dregs, the leftovers from making tofu. The term gained national attention after the 2008 Sichuan earthquake, where 20,000 of the nearly 70,000 victims were schoolchildren who died in collapsed school buildings that were later shown to have been hastily, carelessly, and shoddily built. In July 2010, anger over shoddy construction erupted in the hard-hit Sichuan earthquake area when a building that was intended to be a new home for earthquake victims collapsed just weeks before it was due to be put into use. The prevalence of these tofu projects results from rampant corruption and graft in China. Officials often skim money from projects, leaving insufficient funds for quality materials, qualified staff, and proper workmanship. Additionally, projects are frequently awarded to companies based on political connections rather than qualifications. Furthermore, tribute projects are often rushed to meet deadlines, particularly for state anniversaries. For example, in 2007, a bridge in Hunan province collapsed during construction as it was hurriedly built for the 50th anniversary of the local prefecture's founding, resulting in 64 fatalities. Lastly, local governments heavily rely on revenue from construction activities, such as land sales and transfer fees, which incentivizes them to promote rapid and unchecked growth, even if it means turning a blind eye to substandard construction. In July 2021, another instance of tofu-dreg construction occurred in Zhengzhou, Hainan province, bringing the entire city to a standstill due to heavy rains and flooding. The city was referred to as a sponge city due to its vulnerable drainage system. While some argued that the unprecedented rainfall was to blame, evidence later surfaced pointing to weak infrastructure. Following a visit to China in early 2011, Canadian journalist Lawrence Solomon expressed concerns shared by many Chinese citizens about the potential failure of a tofu dam, which could lead to hundreds of thousands of downstream victims. Chinese architect Li Hu noted that while tofu-dreg projects are prevalent in China, they are outnumbered by buildings without construction flaws. However, he mentioned that poorly constructed buildings often suffer reduced lifespans or leakages rather than collapse. A survey conducted in February 2023 on natural disaster risks reported nearly 600 million buildings in China. The rapid urbanization drive in China has resulted in many residential and major infrastructure projects failing to meet required quality standards. Instances of newly constructed buildings collapsing shortly after completion due to weaknesses and lack of proper quality have been likened to tofu-dreg construction. On April 29, 2022, a commercial building in Changsha City, Hunan province, collapsed, housing apartments, a hotel, and a cinema. The incident resulted from the use of counterfeit materials and hollowing out buildings, a common practice in China that creates tofu buildings. The collapse led to significant pain and loss, with 53 fatalities and dozens seriously injured. The incident left a large void in the Changsha streetscape, littered with shattered concrete beams. Chinese state media reported that numerous individuals were rescued from the rubble with severe injuries, and some remained buried for almost 6 days. During a briefing, local official Wu Guiying offered apologies, expressing extreme suffering, indescribable self-blame, and extending sincere apologies to the people affected by the tragedy. In 2009, Shanghai authorities temporarily detained 9 individuals linked to the incident involving a 13-story building in the Lotus Riverside complex in the Minhang district of Shanghai. The collapse resulted in the death of one construction worker. Despite ongoing investigations, the issue of poor construction quality remains a possibility. On June 28th, Shanghai's local newspaper reported that over 400 residents in other buildings within the Lotus Riverside complex surrounded the main office of the primary developer, My Home Real Estate Company. They demanded refunds for their apartment payments due to safety concerns. "We dare not live in our homes anymore. We demand that the investors refund our money and compensate us for the fallen property prices, so we can buy somewhere else." An investigative team, comprising construction experts from the Minhang district, was immediately formed after the accident. Preliminary findings suggested that the building collapsed like a tofu-dreg construction due to a massive pile of earth beneath the building shifting during the construction of the underground parking garage. This shift caused structural damage to the entire building. Surprisingly, the investigation revealed that My Home Real Estate Company had been operating illegally for over 4 years. Despite this, the company was the developer of 2 other buildings in the Minhang district, both almost completely sold out. The issue of poor construction quality, often resulting from cost-cutting measures such as the use of subpar materials and dishonest practices, has surfaced alongside rapid economic development and the need for infrastructure to keep up with the pace. China has long been concerned about instances of tofu-dreg construction, referring to shoddy, low-quality construction projects failing to meet standards. These projects extend beyond housing to other critical public infrastructure. In 1999, the sudden collapse of a bridge in Chongqing claimed over 40 lives. The bridge, constructed in less than 3 years, was found to have been built using low-quality materials. The pressing concern among Chinese citizens today, as reported by the Guangzhou-based news outlet, is how many other tofu-dreg construction projects have yet to be uncovered. Tofu-dreg construction, stemming from speedy, shoddy work, often uses cheap and quick materials, primarily concrete. The rushed construction and use of substandard concrete lead to poor building infrastructure, exacerbating issues during natural disasters, as seen in the Sichuan earthquake. Concrete production contributes significantly to greenhouse gas emissions. China has been a leader in cement, concrete production, producing more cement in a 2-year period from 1980 to 2011 than the U.S. did throughout the 20th century. All of this cement production has led to vast emissions of greenhouse gases. China's contribution to GHGs from cement alone rivaled total GHG emissions of some countries. China is using a lot of cement, and is using it quickly, causing tofu construction of buildings. Tofu construction only leads to more construction, as after the Sichuan earthquake, China finished close to 29,692 projects to rebuild areas affected by the earthquake. Even without natural disasters, Chinese constructions have still failed. One Australian reporter counted 4 collapsed bridges in just 9 days in July 2012. Chinese officials acknowledge these issues as well, giving life expectancies of buildings, and even warning of future collapses of buildings as they age and reach certain lifespans. Even in reconstruction efforts, tofu-dreg construction remains prevalent. Sources from the post-earthquake county of Yongcheng cite having moved into buildings already having cracks within walls of their newly built apartments. Yet construction continues in China, as in the span of 2011-2014, it was predicted that China would have a new skyscraper constructed every 5 days. Construction contributes to about 40% of the world's GHG emissions. Most of these emissions come from materials used, like concrete, tofu-dregs, signature building material, and other materials. Tofu buildings are buildings which are so structurally unsound that they are compared to jiggling blocks of soft tofu, which will crumble at the slightest provocation. The term originates in China, where a construction boom in the late 1990s and early 2000s led to a proliferation of such structures. The numerous issues with tofu buildings were brought to the forefront in 2008, when a devastating earthquake in Sichuan province killed tens of thousands of Chinese, many of whom were trapped when such buildings collapsed. From the outside, tofu buildings look perfectly safe, especially to the casual eye. They have all of the components one would expect to see in a building, and often the inside is finished in such a way that it looks secure as well. The superstructure and foundation of this type of building is not sound, and this can lead to serious problems in earthquakes, floods, and fires, as the unstable building may collapse or be badly damaged. Corruption at every stage complicates the small profit margins on projects, as they were without people sticking their hand out to begin with. And this corruption can manifest in ways you weren't expecting, or via contracted firms you weren't expecting it from. So instead of workers spending, say, 20 days building a tower floor, they spend 5 days. Running low on cement? Use bottles to pad out the total mix. Your contract for better quality steel rebar has gone belly up and absconded with the money you spent on them. China's alarming tofu-dreg construction, building speed is terrible.
Under the CCP's regime, substandard construction practices, known as tofu-dreg, are widespread in China. This term describes buildings constructed with poor workmanship, resulting in low quality or even total structural failure. Online footage captured a piece of marble falling from a building in Tianjin. Fortunately, there were no injuries. In the Chinese real estate market, most houses, particularly those built after 2015, are of poor quality. Many citizens have paid exorbitant prices for substandard homes. The notion of these houses lasting 70 years is almost laughable. It would be astonishing if they endured that long. In reality, significant renovations will likely be necessary after just 30 years, and some issues may be irreparable. This grim outlook is well-founded. China's infrastructure, in general, suffers from poor quality. A devastating house collapse in Wenzhou resulted in the tragic deaths of 4 people, with some desperately fleeing as the structure crumbled. In Shanghai district, Jiangmen, Guangdong, a house near a bustling market also collapsed, adding to the region's alarming trend of structural failures. In Tianjin, a gas explosion led to the collapse of a building within a community. The extent of the destruction from a single gas explosion raises serious concerns about the construction quality and safety of these homes. Since the turn of the millennium, the skyrocketing real estate prices have turned the market into a hotbed for exorbitant profits. Unfortunately, the lengthy construction timelines of 2 to 3 years have magnified the industry's flaws, making it challenging to maintain quality control in the rush to attract buyers. Eager property owners, lured by the promise of quick deeds, often compromise on standards and end up with subpar units. As prices soared to unprecedented heights, developers began prioritizing profit margins over construction standards. Exploiting market dynamics, these profit-driven entities deliberately ignored defects, confident that flaws would go unnoticed during resales. This unscrupulous approach left unsuspecting buyers at the mercy of developers who knew that dissatisfied customers had little leverage, especially when issues seemed minor. The real estate landscape thus became rife with compromised integrity, with buyers navigating a perilous terrain where their concerns were systematically disregarded. In China, collapsing buildings are unfortunately not uncommon. For instance, the slope protection of Xi'an community in Sichuan collapsed, causing severe damage to the building. The quality of China's buildings and infrastructure is so poor that even rain can lead to collapses, highlighting the dire state of construction standards in the country. On May 27, 2024, one unit of a building in a neighborhood in Anhui province collapsed, killing at least 4 people. One Nissan stated, "The quality of the building won't last long enough to finish the mortgage." Another lamented, "This one collapsed today, and the other will collapse tomorrow. I've spent nearly all of my life savings to buy a home under the CCP's rule. People spend so much money on homes, but the quality is so poor." Dramatic online footage reveals the collapse of a building in Anhui province, where the top floor balcony of a house suddenly crumbled, releasing a cloud of smoke. This incident occurred on the evening of June 11, 2024, following a heavy downpour. The exterior wall of a 30-story building fell off, damaging vehicles parked on the street below. The fact that only rain caused such damage raises serious concerns about the building's construction quality. On May 29, 2024, a user commented on X, describing these incidents as tofu-dreg projects, terms used for corruption-driven constructions under criminal syndicates, which are premeditated and executed without fear of repercussions. Nissan posted a video showing a man on a rooftop, capturing the moment when the external wall of a building detached, clearly showcasing the poor construction quality. Back in February 2021, a neighborhood under construction in Beijing faced similar issues, including leaking roofs and cracked walls. The cement on the walls was so weak that it could be crushed by hand. A video showed a resident, suspecting poor quality, using a tool resembling a screwdriver to dig through the roof. Shockingly, it turned out there was no cement, only dirt. These incidents highlight the rampant issues of substandard construction practices and corruption, raising alarms about the safety and durability of buildings in China. A citizen recorded an incident where a building's surface was blown off by the wind and crashed directly onto the sidewalk. On November 23, 2023, a residential building in Anhui Province suddenly lost its exterior wall. The veneer fell to the ground, causing pedestrians to scream in fear. The local neighborhood committee casually stated that the property management company had been informed. On the afternoon of April 27, 2024, another residential building developed a large crack from top to bottom, causing one side to tilt. Witnesses reported that the crack started at 10 cm and quickly expanded to a meter, accompanied by a strong smell of gas. The footage reveals the sound of the building cracking and pieces of the staircase falling. People screamed in terror, with one person asking, "Is it collapsing?" The scene was chaotic, and someone urgently shouted, "Get out!" The following day, the local government issued a report on the incident, confirming that the building was cracked and tilted. They described the entire structure as dangerously tilted but mentioned that residents had been evacuated and resettled more than half a year ago, in August 2022. The cracked building was vacant and slated for demolition. Mainland Chinese media personality, Teacher Wang Daily, questioned why the building wasn't reinforced or demolished earlier, given its known danger. Leaving it standing is like leaving a ticking bomb, he argued. Even though the building is empty, adjacent buildings are still occupied, putting other residents at risk. The cracks are rapidly growing, indicating that the building continues to tilt. If it collapses, the consequences will be dire. Due to ongoing complaints from the building's owners about its poor quality, local officials decided to inspect the situation. However, during their visit, they found themselves trapped in the elevator, sparking fear and embarrassment. Residents exclaimed, "Heaven knows," as the officials were stranded. Homeowners on site sarcastically asked, "Are you scared?" The elevator stopped. "Can you get out?" others added. "Don't move." Some even suggested, "Maybe there's nothing wrong with it, it's fine." One remarked, "Thank goodness the divine is looking after us," implying the officials finally experienced the building's notorious problems firsthand. In another alarming video, homeowners tested the quality of their new homes. One person easily removed two door frames by hand, revealing they were made of styrofoam. A woman commented that the frames weren't as sturdy as Lego. Towards the end of the video, a man stomped on the floor, causing it to shift. The question arose, who would dare to live in such a place? How long can such substandard buildings last? The prevalence of tofu-dreg construction in China is both widespread and deeply concerning. Over a decade ago, the Xi'an earthquake brought this issue to light. On May 12, 2008, at 2:28 p.m., a devastating 8.2 magnitude earthquake struck Wuchang County in Sichuan Province. According to China's Ministry of Civil Affairs, 69,420 people lost their lives. However, the Bashu Alliance, a Chinese civil organization, estimated the actual death toll to be around 300,000, including over 30,000 students, many of whom were young children in kindergarten. The local school buildings were suspected to be tofu-dreg projects. Despite Premier Mr. W.G. Ba's demand for a thorough investigation into these substandard constructions, no significant action has been taken. Let's revisit the tragic events of the earthquake. Footage shows students frantically running down the stairs, attempting to escape, as the school building collapsed in an instant. The devastation was immediate and heartbreaking. At the time, mainland Chinese media reported that the cement in the rubble was so loose that people could break the pre-made concrete slabs into any shape, almost like cookies. The rebar was equally weak, with some slabs containing only 3 tiny bars that could be broken with minimal force. On May 12, 2024, more than 100 parents who had lost their children in the earthquake went to the site to mourn, but local police blocked their entry. The CCP authorities have continually denied responsibility for the tofu-dreg construction linked to the disaster. No cemetery has been established for the children who perished, and for years, parents have been prevented from visiting the site to mourn. One parent mentioned that after the earthquake, the CCP encouraged bereaved parents to have another child, promising to cover the education and medical expenses for the second child, as well as the parents' medical expenses. 16 years later, these promises remain unfulfilled. The real-life footage of the WN earthquake is deeply shocking, and the collapse of tofu-dreg buildings across China is alarming. On June 8, 2024, a user on X platform posted a screenshot of a conversation between a professional and a friend about the issue of China's tofu-dreg buildings. The friend asked, "Why do Chinese homes have a property right of 70 years, but an actual service life of less than 50 years?" The professional explained that cement takes at least 28 days to reach 80% strength. However, in China, floors are built in just 7 days, disturbing the cement before it sets and creating tiny cracks. This weakens the bond between the cement and the reinforcement, making it difficult to check because the flaws are internal. The normal construction process should allow 15 days for drying and 28 days after pouring the concrete, meaning it takes 43 days to build a floor. Consequently, constructing a 30-story building should take at least 48 to 60 months, or about 4 to 5 years. However, in reality, buildings in China are often completed in less than 2 years, leading to what are known as rotten-tailed buildings. Expecting these buildings to last 70 to 100 years is unrealistic and highlights the severe construction issues in China. These revelations underscore the catastrophic potential of poor construction practices in China, suggesting that in 50 years, high-rise ruins could litter the landscape. This commentary, posted in Radio Free Asia under the title China Specialty: The Endless Tofu-Dreg Projects, delves into the shady secrets and interests behind these projects. Blogger Le Changpeng noted that asking for the truth is futile because everyone already knows it. The government's bizarre lies cover up the reality, much like with the tofu-dreg school buildings in the WN earthquake. Every new project births billionaires, while completed projects leave a trail of exploited workers. The era's legacy is not truth, but the creative ways the truth is concealed. The dire consequences of poor construction in China are beyond alarming. In 50 years, the country could be littered with the ruins of high-rise buildings. This thought alone is chilling. A commentary in Radio Free Asia, titled China Specialty: The Endless Tofu-Dreg Projects, questions how many shady secrets and interests are hidden in these tofu-dreg projects. Blogger Le Changpeng insightfully noted, "Everyone knows the truth, but the more you know, the more the government will bury it under bizarre lies." Just like with the tofu-dreg school buildings and the Xi'an earthquake, the truth and the lives of thousands of children are forever buried in the rubble, he went on to say. Every new project births more billionaires, and every completed project leaves behind a legacy of exploited workers. The era's greatest legacy isn't the truth, but the creativity in hiding it. They tell the lies, and the people turn them into folklore. Chinese commentator Yan Dan added, "The Chinese Communist government has always targeted democratic systems, restricted freedom, and tarnished traditional values. Their claims of putting people first are hollow. They only seek power and profit." CCP officials, driven by greed, exploit national tragedies without hesitation. China's justice system, overseen by the executive authorities, shields minor officials with the protection of their superiors, making them unaccountable to the people. With power backing them, they exploit citizens without remorse. Many believe jerry building is why state projects have degraded into tofu-dregs. In ancient China, despite corrupt officials, the imperial family and government left behind grand architecture that lasted centuries. In stark contrast, the CCP's reign has spawned unparalleled corruption, fostering a culture where poor construction like tofu-dreg projects flourishes. These insights paint a stark picture of the systemic corruption and its catastrophic impact on construction quality in China.